Thank you all for coming. I have some friends here that I haven't seen in a long time, and it's super special that you came out. I have friends that I see often that they came out. Your support means the world to me. People that don't know me, that means so much to me too, that I get to maybe meet new people and get to know people. I am a self-taught artist, and I'm self-taught. Really, the only reason I didn't go to art school and that I'm self-taught is because at a very, very young age, I was taught that art was a hobby and it was not something you made a living at. I'm very stubborn. So for 35 years, I have been working in the arts industries and in the creative industries. And I calculated last night, 25 of those 35 years I have worked for myself. So the 10 years that I didn't work for myself, they weren't all in a row. They were 3 years here, 2 years there. And it was always when that little voice kind of came into my head that said, you can't do this. And it said, you need to be normal, okay? Because for some reason, you know, normal people have 9-to-5 jobs, and that gives them stability and security. And, well, I'm not normal. And I doubt most of you feel like you're normal either, you know, thank God, right? So I would come to these often when I first started showing my artwork, which I didn't actually start showing my artwork, my fine art, until 2007, 2008. So, you know, 12, 13 years ago. And the very first piece I showed was a drawing of my daughter, who was like 6 at the time. And I drew her in pastel because I did not know how to paint a fine piece of art. I could paint large billboards because I worked for a billboard company, so I could paint really big stuff on a wall, but I didn't know how to paint a fine art painting. And all of my art materials fit in a shoebox because it was just colored pencils and pastels and pencils and erasers. And I drew this picture of my daughter, and I decided that I was going to show it at Art Serve. And I went to Home Goods and bought a painting that was on clearance so that I could take that one out of the frame and put mine in it, right? And it was, you know, it was already hooked up to hang and everything, so I was like, I'm good. And I showed up at Art Serve with it, and they hung it in the show. And I was so excited that my piece got selected to hang in the show, my very first show. And I didn't even know how to act or what to wear or what to do when my very first art show. And I showed up at Art Serve, and again, this is only 12, 13 years ago. I showed up at Art Serve, and one of the first people that I talked to was like, oh, where's your piece? And I said, oh, it's right here. It's my daughter. She's like, oh, that's very nice. And she goes, here's my piece. And through the conversation, she said, I found out, well, everybody's artwork made that show. If you were a member from Art Serve and you brought a piece of artwork, your art made the show. And I thought, of course, it was a juried show, right? And that they had picked mine. And I realized, well, I could have brought any piece of junk. They were going to hang it because I paid my dues, right? But nonetheless, it was still exciting. So like I say, in those years, I came to every one of these type of things that I could. Okay, I wanted all the wealth of information that you could give me. And I would come with my notebook, and I wanted you to give me the steps. Give me the steps. How do I get in the gallery? Give me the steps. How do I sell my artwork? Give me the steps, right? And I always walked out, of course, not really having the steps, right? Not still, you know, being motivated, being inspired, but not really being sure what to do. I'm going to give you the first step, okay? I decided I'm giving them the steps. Step number 1, move. Take the step, okay? That's your first step in anything that you're doing creatively, in anything you're doing in your life. But creatively, you've got to move. And the further you move, okay, we all kind of create this safety box around ourselves, right? The further you move outside of that safety zone, the further you're going to go. okay? And every time I moved out of my little comfort safety zone, I grew. My artwork took off, things happened, right? But it was only when I had the guts to move. And showing that piece of my daughter, even though anything I would have brought there was going to get in the show, was my first step, okay? It was the first thing that was going to get me to frame a piece of work and show it. And for the next couple years, any show that Broward Art Guild did or ArtServe did, I created a piece for. So if they had an abstract show, I created an abstract piece. That if they had a summer show, whatever it was, if it had a theme, I was creating the piece. And up until the very last day, the day of intake, I was framing it and getting it there because I only had the 1 month that I found out that they were going to have a show to get this piece ready. But you know what that made me do? It made me create. Because I wasn't really creating before that. And even though that wasn't really the way to get, you know, my style known or my, you know, that's not the best advice for an artist at the time, for me it worked because it got me into shows and it got me to actually work and paint. So I was doing that, and then I kind of had this epiphany and this shift of where I was like, okay, this is almost like insanity. I'm doing this, you know, like over and over again. I never win an award. I never sell a piece. I never, you know, something's got to change here, right? So I decided I was going to create really good work of what I wanted to create. And I was going to, it didn't matter how long it took. I did give myself goals and deadlines. I wanted to still try to create 1 piece a month, but I was really going to concentrate on what I was best at, which was portraiture. Okay, that's what my soul is about, drawing people, okay, and connecting with people. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do portraiture. I'm going to do it in the styles. I'm going to start stepping out of my comfort zone. I'm going to try to paint, okay, and do these things. And I'm going to wait for the show that my work fits into and then take it to that show. And like the second show I did was actually Art Bravo at ArtServe, which at the time was a $1,000 award for first place. And they called, you know, all the awards, and then when they got to first place, they called my name. And I didn't even know they called my name. Somebody had to go, they said you. You know, I was like, what? And I hadn't even looked at the awards. I was so used to not winning an award, I didn't even know what the award was. And I opened up the envelope in the car, and I almost crashed. I was like, oh my God, $1,000, you know? And out of that show, because I won, there was a gallery owner there. And he approached me at the end of the show, and he said, I'd really like to show your work along with 3 other women, and I want to come to your studio and tour your studio. Well, my studio was in my dining room at my house, okay? And of course, I was embarrassed by that. I thought, oh, you know, this is a gallery guy, and he wants to come to my studio. You know what? He didn't care. He didn't care. He just wanted to see my work. And he was very happy with my work, and it didn't matter that my studio was in my home. You know, so those things that I was fearful of, that I thought I wasn't going to be good enough, because they don't matter. Those things that hold you back because you think, well, I'm not this enough and I'm not that enough, they really don't matter, because people don't really, if they're interested in your work, they don't care about the rest of that stuff. They're interested in the work, okay? So, kept working, ended up doing a series called Ink. I decided I was going to brand myself, and I did a series called Ink. I became very well known for it. I did 35 pieces. It started out with me chasing after another move moment where now, I had no tattoos. I did not have yellow hair, okay? I was a mom of twins. I looked like a mom of twins, okay? And I would go up to girls that had tattoos all over them and be like, I'm an artist, I want to paint you, please can I paint you? And they would look at me like I was nuts, you know? And one girl said yes. And she let me take photos of her, and she was the one that I won the award of her drawing, okay? And then once my work started getting known, I had people coming to me and saying, you know, I'd be out and somebody'd be like, you're Ink. They didn't know my name, but they knew my brand, okay? And they were like, you're Ink. And they would say, I have a tattoo, and they'd be like, you know, can you paint me? And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, you know. But I did 35 really dynamic pieces, and it became less and less about the ink and the tattoos and more about the person. And I actually morphed that series into a series called Dare to Be Different. And it was about women specifically. There were a few men in the series as well that really stood in their own. You know, they stood in who they were, in the just being me, okay? And they had pink and blue hair, and Tiffany's here, she knows all of them, you know? And they were real people. They were a lot of artists in our community. They were, you know, they were moms. They were, you know, every walk of life. And I put these women, 35, I had a gallery representing me. I had a solo show. I put them all in the show. And the really cool thing is they all showed up to the opening. So it was like this celebrity event, because the people that didn't know them were like, oh my God, that's the girl in the painting. And they were all taking their photos. And it was like a really, really cool moment. But the coolest part about that moment was that this little old lady came up to me. And I'm careful saying that now because I'm getting up there in age. But I'm like, how old was she? So she came up to me and she goes, you know, if I saw that girl in that painting with the tattoos and the pink hair and everything on the street, I would just immediately judge her and walk by. I wouldn't stop and look at her. And she said, these women are beautiful, she said to me. And she was standing like this far away from the painting, right? And she's like, they're just beautiful. And she goes, and you can really see there's more to them than just the exterior, just the tattoos. You've captured something in them. And I get goosebumps just talking about it. And that was such a crucial moment for me, because I was like, oh, wow. That was my artist statement, and she hadn't read it. And I'm like, I am communicating exactly what I want to say without saying it, just by looking at my artwork. So then it became, well, what do I want to say? Because now I can say something, and I can say something really important, and what is that going to be? And I kind of struggled with that for a few months after that show. I was like, oh, what direction am I going to go in? What am I going to do? And the gallery, which was Gallery 2014 in Hollywood, they're no longer there, but they represented me for 5 years, and they were really great to me. They had a fundraiser for an organization called Girl Rising. And Girl Rising is about human trafficking and about educating a girl in countries all over the world, and how if you educate a girl, it can change her whole, not only her whole life, but an entire community's life and the world. And they had like these different short movies, and they showed it in a screening of these different girls in their life and how they were educated and how it progressed. And this little girl from Haiti, she was 8 years old, right after the devastating earthquake there, she could no longer go to school, and she loved school. But she couldn't go anymore because her school had been destroyed, and they had these tent schools. But only the people who had the money for a uniform and for the books and everything could go to the tent schools. So she would walk to the school every day in her street clothes, show up, sit in the back, and the teacher would send her home. And every single day she'd keep going back. And the teacher would send her home and say, you can't be here. And she looked around and she's like, I don't want to be like my older sister who's, you know, doing this chores and doing that and living the life that my mother led and all of that. I don't want to be on where I'm being trafficked. And she could see this at 7, 8 years old. And they had this voiceover as she was walking through the devastation on her way to the school. And in the voiceover, she was saying in her head, if I survived this earthquake, if I survived and I'm still here, I must have a purpose. There must be a reason. And that hit me to the core. And I was like, that was my 7-year-old. My 7-year-old in me had a purpose. My 7-year-old in me knew that what my surroundings and my environment expected of me, I could do way more than that, and I was supposed to. And that had been what was driving me my whole life. And it was the key people in my life that noticed me, that took the time to say, you know what, you're okay. You're okay just the way you are. That made me keep going. And I was like, that's what I want to say, and that's what I want to do for young girls. Okay? So I went home the day after that movie. I sat down. I woke up the next day. It was a Sunday morning. I sat in my patio, and I wrote the entire plan for Girl Noticed. I wrote I wanted to go to 50 states, recognize at least 50 women through 50 murals before I was 50. Okay, and at the time I was like 48. You know, I was like, I gotta put some kind of time limit on there, right? Well, yeah. Now it's while I'm in my 50s. And I decided I was gonna do the murals that day in charcoal because I thought to myself, well, I want to make this really big statement, but there's murals everywhere, and how can I be different? How can my murals be different? And I thought, well, nobody does a mural in charcoal. That's insane, right? But then I was like, but gosh, that sends the message because it's going to wash off the wall. It's going to fade away. And my message is, notice the girl before what she values about herself fades away. And I'm like, put it in the plan. And I put it all in the plan, exactly what I wanted to do. And I looked at it, and that little voice came in my head and said, oh, you're crazy. Okay. And I thought, all right, I'm going to show it to 3 people. I showed it to one of my closest friends, who is my biggest cheerleader, because I knew she'd say, yes, yes, yes. And I showed it to her, and she said, yes, 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 this is the greatest thing ever. I had in my plan a photographer would travel with me. She said, yes, I want to be the photographer, because she was a photographer. She's like, I want to be the photographer. I was like, oh, okay, great. Knew you would love it. I then went to a very good friend, who a lot of you probably know, who used to be very big in the art scene. She doesn't do as much now, but she did a lot in the art scene back in the day. And she poo-poos on everything, okay? Everything she can find what's wrong with it. So I showed it to her, because I knew she'd tell me what was wrong with it. And I thought, I want to hear what's wrong with it. And she did. She ripped it apart. Oh, you're never going to get support for this. How are you going to get the money for this? Nobody's going to give you money to do a temporary mural. You can't do them in charcoal. How the heck are you going to do that? Da, da, da. You know, like, told me every single thing I needed to know not to do. And I was like, okay, all right. And then the third person I took to was the gallery owner of Gallery 2014, because I respected her opinion. And I thought, she may tell me that it's not a good idea. I'm not going to decide whether I do this or not based on her opinion, but I was scared to death to show her because I thought this is the direction I'm going to go in with my artwork. And she wants a painting from me once a month to hang in the gallery. So I need to at least let her know the direction I'm going in, because I'm not going to be able to do that. So I set up an appointment with her, and at this point we had become pretty friendly, and she's like, oh my God, what, are you leaving me? And I'm like, you know, because I dressed nice, I came, you know, with my little binder, you know, and she was like, and I said, no, I want to show you this. And she read it, and she was completely silent, and she looked up and she said, we're going to make this happen, and I want to be your photographer. And for the first 2 years, she traveled with me, and her foundation matched every donation that I got. So whenever I did a fundraiser, her foundation matched it. And that really, like, launched Girl Noticed, okay? A lot of you will say, well, you had that break. You know, we look at other artists and we're like, well, you knew the right person. You know, and I used to do that. I used to be like, well, Lebo's brother, he's in the news and da-da-da-da. You know, everybody knows him in Miami and that's why he got his break. And, you know, you got to know somebody. Well, I would have never gotten in that gallery had I not decided I was going to start creating really quality artwork, had I not decided I was going to do a series and brand myself, had I not decided I'd apply to be in the gallery. 250 applicants they got when they opened that gallery, and they selected 15, okay? And yes, it would have been much more difficult for me to do Girl Noticed without them when I first started out, but I took all the steps. I made all the movements every single day that I needed to make to get in that gallery, to be available for the opportunity that was going to present itself for me. And if I can leave you with anything, it's just make yourself ready. Whatever it is you want, just start doing the steps. Because if you do the steps, then when the opportunity is there, you're ready for it and you can capitalize on it. Instead of saying, oh, yeah, well, I don't have my portfolio. Well, I don't have my CD. Well, I don't have this, I don't have that. Just take the steps, because eventually that opportunity will come. And you're not even seeing the opportunities if you're not ready, because you're not open for them, you're not ready for them, okay? So Girl Notice is about 4 years old now. I have painted 52 women. I've recognized, so what I do is I've been to 14 states so far. And what I do is I get nominations from the state and from the community to notice a girl or woman of any age. And I then choose from the nominations between 1 and 4 females. And I draw them very large on the wall. And those people that I draw they represent people like them. So I've gotten to highlight amazing causes. I did a 15-year-old that had Asperger's. Her mother nominated her. And when her mom nominated her, she talked all about her Asperger's. And I said, I'd really like to talk to your daughter. Can I ask her why she would want to be noticed? And she wrote me a letter telling me about that she was being bullied. Never mentioned having Asperger's. Mentioned she knew she was different. She knows she has Asperger's, but it wasn't in her note to me. So I didn't focus my mural on the Asperger's. I focused my mural on bullying. And I was able to then go and talk in front of 250 13 to 16-year-old girls and say, can you imagine a girl who's streamlined into public school, into your classrooms, that her eyes go one way, her voice is monotone, she doesn't change her diction, and yet she knows she's different, but she so wants to fit in. She so wants to be a part of what all you are. You all get up every morning and you worry about what you're going to wear, and you worry about your social media and what you're going to say and what you're going to do and what you're, and what your friends think. And she worries about the same exact things, except there's these two things she can't control, and people are teasing and bullying her about them. And these young girls were just like, and I was like, oh, okay, I got to go talk to more people. I've got to do workshops. So I created workshops, I created presentations, I go into a community and I try to impact that community as much as I possibly can around whatever it is I'm highlighting. Refugees, I did 2 refugees in Nebraska. Stage 4 cancer survivor. Not because she was a stage 4 cancer survivor, because there's so many cancer survivors that not get nominated, but because she saw that when she went to her clinic and her women's center to be treated, in the hospital to be treated, there wasn't one pamphlet on how to emotionally deal with cancer. Not one. Everything was the physical part. Not one thing that said how to emotionally deal with it. So she wrote a book. And she started a nonprofit, and she gave all her books to the cancer centers in California. And I flew to California and I made her huge on the wall. And when she showed up in front of that wall and spun around in front of her kids, I mean, you know, step number 2. Have a why. All that I just told you is my why. Okay? If you have a why, and it doesn't have to be as grand as my why is, okay? I got a big why. I want to change the world. Okay? I'm out to change the world. I want to impact as many lives as I can impact. But if you have a why, as small as it is, it'll motivate you to move. And step number 3 is to do step number 1 and step number 2. Okay? Over and over and over again. So what I ask of you, I have an email list going around. I would love for you to put your name and email on there so that I can send you an introduction to Girl Noticed. What I need from you for Girl Noticed is every state that I have gotten to has happened very organically. It's somebody knows someone that they connected with me with in another state, and they said, I think this person can help you. And before you knew it, we were making it happen. All I need is a building and another organization to work with. Because now that I go, I team up with other organizations so that I can highlight their organizations and bring them in on the project. And then the rest of it, the money, it doesn't take a lot of money. And I'll figure out the money. Okay, if I have to fundraise, but you know what? When businesses find out what I'm doing, they're more than happy to give. So my friend that said there's no way, she was wrong. Thank you.
You guys know people in other states? I'd like to open it up for some question and answer.
I'll dare to be the first one.
Okay, awesome.
Have you thought about creating a mural that would stay in the same project? I'm sure it's got to be in the back of your mind. because the fact that
It's not in the back of my mind, actually,
No.
because the temporary nature of the project, it's temporary, which adds that urgency that you need to notice, okay? But it has a permanent message, okay? I'm not attached to the artwork, all right? I'm attached to the message. And when people start to see it disappearing, I get photos all the time. Now, it's funny, kind of a funny point, talking about moving and stepping out of your comfort zone. The very first mural I did was in Hollywood, Florida. And I had not ever done a mural in charcoal. And I invited all these people. I mean, it was this big social media thing. It had been written up in the paper, and I had every kind of charcoal there you could think of, because I didn't know what was going to work on the wall. Okay? And it took me 2 hours to draw the first eyeball. And I stepped back. I was on this big scaffolding. I stepped back, and the gallery owners, her and her husband, were behind me. And I stepped back, and I looked back, and I said, how's it look? And Ken, her husband, said, oh my God, it looks amazing. And Elizabeth turned around and she was like, it took 2 hours. We only have today. Because I finished the mural in 1 day. Okay, that's how I get in and out of the States quick enough that I can afford to be there. Okay, 1 day for the mural, 2 days for workshops, and that's it. Okay, so, and I'm like, book me for as much as you can. I went to Alaska last year, and I was able to work at a homeless drop-in center. I did a workshop. A daycare, I did a workshop. After school program, I did a workshop. An arts community, I did a presentation. And a teen center, I did a workshop. In 4 days, and a mural, and a humongous mural, okay? So I did pass a lot of my cards around. That's what I had with me. It's girlnotice.org. All the murals are on there. There's lots of information. It's a super easy to navigate site and you can get the information about it on there too. But you know, I'm not concerned with that because I get photos all the time saying, look at my mural. You know, that one's lasting a little too long. You know, so, but you know, it's cool that people get it. They get that, oh my gosh, it's not going to be there all the time, and they look for it. They look for, you know, that to happen. I just did one in Virginia that is paint, so I do paint them sometimes. But that wall is scheduled to be demolished in the next 2 years. Okay, I did one at the Galleria Mall for an event, for Artopia event last year, that I painted the whole thing in one night. And the next day, the workers were there for another event painting over it. So, you've got a window of time to notice. It sends the message.
How about finding a way to make the message permanent by maybe publishing a book once the...
Well, that is why so that was in the plan. So I was like, I want a photographer to be there because I'll have the photographs as a permanent, piece. And then, my hope was that after the 50 states, I would do a book. But I think I'm going to do a book before that. I actually, that's I think my next moment is I've always loved to write, and I really want to write about some of my experiences. So next year I plan on, that's my goal, is next year to have a book written, and then I'll wait for the opportunity to publish it and those kind of things. But I want to get it written, and I started that. So instead, is when I'm done the 50 states, what I would love to do is I want to cruise, okay, where all the 50 women that I well, it's more than 50 women, all the women that I recognize are invited on the cruise. I want to get that funded, okay, and you watch. I'll do it.
Not part of the project, she does have murals that are still up literally feet from here on this block that you can see and all throughout.
Yeah, so I have Notorious inside the ice cream shop is all my work. Wander Shop outside of their shop is my work. JBC Juice Bar is Your Ego Is Not Your Amigo is my work. And you have to go to Hair Circus. Okay, Hair Circus is what, 10 minutes from here, right? It's Tarpon River. What is that called? Is it okay? So it's Tarpon River, and the entire inside. Now, what I get to do when I get to make the money, because my nonprofit is Girl Noticed, and I'm not about the money for that. Everything that I make is really literally just to make it run and to give back, to the point where if I get a $5,000 sponsorship to go to another state, I give $1,500 back to the community out of a $5,000 sponsorship. Okay. If I get a $2,500 sponsorship, I give $1,500 back. So it's, I'm like, that's what I'm about. Is I don't want to take money from organizations that need the money. I want to give them money. I want to take money from businesses that have the money, that want to see their community grow and unite and be inclusive and all of those things.
Right.
So when I paint for all these businesses, I take their money. So, but Hair Circus was, I have two, Jessica and Vanessa are here. Raise your hands so they know who you are. Jessica and Vanessa, I worked on Hair Circus with them. They were like the brainchild of how to make the space, and they were the project managers of the space, and they did an amazing job, and it is exactly what it sounds like. And if you're wondering where the new look came from, okay, when you work in a salon that does really cool color for almost a month, you're going to come out like this, okay? Which I'm super excited about, actually. It's a lot of fun, so, yeah.
Which states are you still trying to get into?
Okay, so why don't I tell you the states that I have been to, and then it's all the others, okay? And I would go back to a state given the right opportunity, and if it were sponsored, I would go back to a state that I've already been. I've been to California, Alaska, New York, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Nebraska, Utah, Virginia, thank you, Florida. I am looking to do more locally. I was just talking to Lori, and I remembered her name. I was just talking to Lori, and she mentioned the fact that she works at a at JCC, and I have been really motivated to do a Holocaust survivor. All I need is a wall. I'll find the funding, so I need a wall. I already have the survivor, okay? And I would love to pair a survivor with a young person, because the reason I do women of all ages is because the women that are seniors or are my age or younger, whatever age it is, are the example to the younger girls. It's that they go up there and they say, well, that could be me, because I'm putting real people. This is the difference with my murals. When you go around, there are amazing murals of women that you can find, but most of them are fictional women. They're not women from their community. When I did the mural in Virginia, I did 4 women of color on the wall. And I didn't know. When I pick them, I don't get their photos. I pick them from the nomination, from the words, and then I have them send the photo. So I don't know what they look like. So I did not know that I was going to choose 4 women of color. And I'm doing this humongous, it was like a 61-foot long wall, okay? And I covered the wall. And this girl, there was this big empty lot in front of it, and this young woman of color comes walking like with authority across this thing, and I'm up on the ladder, and I look back and she's like, this is amazing. And I was like, thank you. And she said, I have never seen myself represented this way in such a positive manner on a wall, and this is so important to me and so important to this community. And I was just like, I'm done. And it's like amazing, because like every state I go to has those moments, and they're always different, and I'm never prepared for them, which is beautiful, but they happen. And every time it happens, I'm like, yep, I'm done, I'm good. I've done what I came to do, So any state, honestly, thank you for asking that question, but honestly, any state that, California's a big state. I did one in Marin County. If LA asked me to come, I'm going, so, yeah. Yes?
It sounds like over time you really developed your sense of purpose. Like it's obviously really strong.
I have my why,
Big,
big clear why.
I'm wondering, like, if you flash back to when, I'm just thinking about a lot of creatives in general have the imposter syndrome, like kind of what you're talking about. People telling you as you're growing up, like, that's not a valid choice for your career, and then you kind of get to a place where you're like, but I'm kind of good at this thing, and so you're like juggling those 2 voices in your head. Like, how did you push through essentially? Like, how did you decide I'm going to get really good at this, or even like getting involved at the art circle initially? Like, what was going on in your head being a mom and life?
So I think it was more about what I knew I didn't want for myself than it was what I knew what I wanted. Okay, I had been calling myself an artist since I was like a toddler, right? And honestly, I was not the best artist. I was never the best artist in the room. If I was in art class, which I was only in art class up until middle school, because I was not allowed to take art as an elective, because my mother wanted me to take typing, because when I became a secretary, that would be useful, okay? Yeah. So, do I look like a secretary? Now, there's nothing wrong with being a secretary, okay? Not a thing wrong with being a secretary, but I knew that that was not for me, okay? And what?
Just a small insert, because I'm around the same age. And that is, every time my mother would dress me up in something, and I hated it, I was like, oh, I look like a secretary.
Totally. So my mom would come up to me and she'd be like, I'd be ready to go out on a date or whatever, right? I'd be ready to just go somewhere, and she'd come up to me with a compact, and she'd be like, just let me put a little blush, and I'd be like, oh, don't touch my face, So it was really knowing that I didn't want to be a secretary. I did not want to be a nurse, okay? And all that I really knew is that I loved art. There was something about being creative. And I didn't think that I was going to go sell paintings and make a fortune at 19 years old. So I got out of high school and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I showed up, I took an 18-month course in sign painting because it was the only school that I had written all the schools in Philadelphia where I'm from and said, you know, what do I need to do to get in your school? Because I was determined I was going to do something. And this one school contacted me, and I went for advertising. They're like, well, we don't have a teacher right now for advertising, but you can take the sign painting course. The beginning is typography, so that's the beginning of the advertising course as well. And I was like, okay. And I did it, and I think after 16 months, I got my first job with a billboard company, where I literally showed up for the interview with paintbrushes. And they just said, go paint that. And the next day, they said, go paint that. And I went back 3 days, and on the third day, I signed my life away, and I was climbing billboards. And I was the only female in Philadelphia to climb billboards. At the time, I didn't realize that I was the only female and that this was a little nuts, okay? And I never really realized it till hindsight, like you say, you know? I kept calling myself an artist, and you're right. I wasn't really sure that I was. You know, I didn't really think I was, but I called myself that anyway. I wouldn't call it to other people, but I would call it to myself in my head. So I wouldn't introduce myself and say I'm an artist, but I would say it in my head. And then one day, I remember the day laying in bed that I woke up and I was like, I am an artist. I remember that day very clearly. So, you know, yeah. And it's just a matter of, I always just kind of, every single thing that I did career-wise, art-wise, was unconventional. And was like, who does that, okay? I worked for a printer for 5 years. That was one of my jobs, okay? And I didn't know any programs. And I went in as a graphic designer. I went to cover for somebody that was on vacation, and I kind of worked my way around on the computer to make changes, simple changes. And then the guy didn't come back. He went to like Cuba and never came back. And they were like, do you want the job? And I said, yeah. And I went to what was Borders at the time, bookstore, and I sat in the middle of the aisle with every ready for print book, and I taught myself the programs in like a weekend. And then went and worked there for like almost 5 years, okay? And the day I left the printer was because I decided I was getting fat and I didn't want to sit behind a desk anymore, okay? I had learned what I thought I could learn, and I really wasn't interested in learning more in that realm. And I was like, well, now I'm a little bored, and I gained 20 pounds, and I want to get my hands in the paint again. So I printed door hangers that said I was a faux finisher, a muralist. And during my half-hour lunch, I hung them all around the neighborhood, around the print shop. And one guy called me, and he asked me to do his whole house. And I said, okay. And I had never faux painted a wall in my life, okay? And I said, that'll be $3,000 for his whole house, okay, which was ridiculous. And he said, okay, right? And I showed up with all brand new tarps, my clothes didn't have any paint on them, my brushes were all brand new, everything was brand new, right? Because I had never done it before. He didn't know that, right? Although there was a clue, but he didn't know that. And I took my 2 weeks vacation to do his house. And I finished his house in 2 weeks. I worked like around the clock, finished his house in 2 weeks, went back to work, quit my job, okay? I printed 500 more of those door hangers. My kids were 10 years old at the time. I would drop them off at the corner and say, okay, walk down the streets. And I would meet them at the corner. I would meet them at the end of the block, and they would get back in the car, and we'd go to the next block, and we were hanging in door hangers. I didn't get one phone call. I hung 500 door hangers, didn't get one phone call. Yet I got a $3,000 job out of 50 door hangers, okay? So I thought my odds were great. No, I didn't get one phone call. I was now 3 weeks with no work, and I was panicking because I was like, oh my God, I quit my job, and that's the last thing I want to do is go back there and tell them I need my job back. And I was a single mom with twins, 10-year-old twins, supporting them on my own with the little bit of child support I could not depend on, okay? And it happened. I just kept doing the next thing, doing the next thing, doing the next thing I needed to do. I was prepared. I kept doing sample boards. I kept doing the things that I needed to do, that if the opportunity came, I was ready for it. And the opportunity came. And, you know, for me, because of my faith, that's a God moment, you know. But it's like those moments don't happen unless you're ready for them, you know. So just do it. Just move.